So how can we stop this timer from inside this function? Well, JavaScript has a clear timeout function, which can be used to stop a timer, but it needs a pointer at that timer, the ID of that timer, you could say, as an input. Now, such a pointer is returned by setTimeout. So here we can store this timer in a constant, for example. And therefore, of course, we could add a variable here, timer, outside of this function so that both functions can use it, and set it equal to the timer here, and then use it as a value in here. And now we just need to connect handle stop to this button if the timer is running. And therefore, we don't always want to pass handle start to onClick, but we want to check if timer started is truthy. And if that's the case, we want to point at handle stop so that this function is executed if this button is clicked and the timer was started, and otherwise it's handle start. But now with that, handle stop should execute if the timer is running, and we should clear this timer. So if this works, we should not see uLost after starting and stopping, if we stop quick enough. So therefore, if I start this and stop this, I still get uLost. And I did press stop immediately. So I start this, I stop this, and still I get uLost. So somehow the timer was not stopped, as it seems. And the problem is that we're using a variable. As you know, whenever state changes, this component function re-executes. And that of course also means that this variable is recreated. So the timer used in handle stop will be a different timer than in handle start because in between the component function re-executed because we updated the state in handle start. That's why we can't use this variable. Now we could use this variable if we define it outside of the component function, because then it would not be recreated. And as a result, now if I reload this, if I start and stop, indeed we never see this uLost message. Of course, this part here isn't updating, we'll take care about that later, but we don't see the uLost message. But we'll now face a different problem. And to show you which problem we'll face, I'll start the 5-second challenge, then immediately the 1-second challenge, and then I'll stop both challenges. So start 5, start 1, stop 5. And you'll see as a result, I still get uLost here in the 5-second challenge, even though I stopped it. I'll show it to you again. Start, start, stop, stop. I did click here on the 5-second challenge. Still, I get uLost. And I don't get that if I just start and stop this challenge. Now here I stopped it and therefore I never get uLost. So why do I get this strange behavior where the 5-second challenge is lost even though I stopped it if I also started and stopped the 1-second challenge? I'm getting that behavior because this timer variable is now a variable defined in this timer challenge file outside of this component function. And therefore, it's actually a variable that will be shared across all component instances that are based on this component function. And therefore, when I start the 5 seconds challenge, this timer will store the timer of the 5 seconds challenge. But if I then, after starting the 5 seconds challenge, also start the 1-second challenge, timer here will be overwritten with a pointer at that 1-second timer. And that pointer at the 5-second timer will basically be thrown away by React. Therefore, when I start this, stop this, and stop this, I'm not stopping anything here in the 5-second challenge because that pointer at the 5-second timer was thrown away when I started the 1-second challenge, because this variable here is defined in this file and is therefore shared across all instances of this component. And that's why a variable is not the solution. So if a variable is not the solution, what is a solution then? Well, refs can be a solution. Because you cannot just use refs to connect to HTML elements, even though that is a very common use case, but you can also use refs to manage any kind of value. And therefore here in this timer challenge component, we can create a new ref. Let's say a timer ref, a timer constant, which stores this ref. And we can now use this timer and set timer.current, because you always must target this current property, as you learned, and set this equal to the timer. And now we can clear the timeout by clearing it with timer.current. Because in this current property, we'll store this pointer at this timer. And now, since this is defined inside of the component function, it will be component instance specific. Every component instance of this timer challenge component will get its own timer ref that works totally independent from the other refs that belong to the other instances of that component. But at the same time, unlike variables defined in component functions, this ref will not be reset or cleared when this component re-executes. Instead, just as with state values, React will store these timer values behind the scenes and make sure that they don't get lost as this component function re-executes. That's another special thing about refs. Like state values, the value here is not lost when this component function re-executes, but unlike state, setting this value also doesn't cause this component function to execute again. And therefore now with that, finally, we can save this and start and stop this, and we don't get you lost. And I can now also start and stop both challenges and stop both, and I never get you lost in any of the two. And that's therefore another use case for refs. If you have a value that must be managed, but that isn't really a state, because that timer itself has no direct impact on the UI. We only care about whether a timer was started, but we, for example, don't want to update the UI when we stop the timer here. Nothing changes here. I just clear the timer, but I don't want to trigger a UI update. So if you have cases like this, where you have a value that doesn't really impact the UI, at least not directly, and you still need to manage it such that it's not reset when the component is re-executed, then you might have a great use case for a ref. And of course, you'll see more such example use cases throughout this section and also throughout this course.